Lawrenceville was a racially segregated little town, and it was enforced. When I started high school, which I think was a 49-50 school year, we attended classes on St. Paul's campus. They didn't even have a high school for blacks. The 50-51 school year, they built James Solomon Russell High School, and that was a segregated black high school.
We are 80 miles from Richmond, and we're about an hour from Raleigh, North Carolina. We got an interstate run through here, which would be Interstate 85. And I was in law enforcement here for 34 years, and the last 16 years I was the sheriff of the county. Brunswick County has been a racial problem here for years.
I was born in a house in Lawrenceville. We had a Dr. Bishop. We didn't have a hospital in Lawrenceville, so all my siblings were born in a house.
Well, Sharif was the fifth child, the third boy, the baby boy, and he was born in 1954. And when he was in school, my mother wanted to be in the forefront, not thinking of herself. So she sent my Sharif and my baby sister Kathy to integrate the schools. And it wasn't very good for them because when he was in school, they would curse him, call him all kind of N-words. And because he was in the minority, it was just a few of them there and he had to take it.
We integrated the schools and we had to fight almost every day. Like I remember in the 5th grade, it was the mayor's wife teaching history, teaching about the Confederacy and the Civil War. I never knew who won the war. She would never admit that the Confederacy lost.
And I heard they were treated harshly down there. And, and I think that's one of the things that put him on, on the road that he traveled.
I was a juvenile delinquent and teenage alcoholic, so at 18 I went in service, thankfully, in the Marines. I always wanted to go to the Marines because I wanted to know why those guys were so crazy and so rough. I found out real fast. But I went in 18. I would have went in 17 if I had sense enough to sign to forge the papers. The military was very good because I had a 2-year enlistment. Thankfully, I found Islam because I was in bad shape. And if I hadn't found Islam, I'm sure I'd be dead. I've been an alcoholic and God knows what else. So it gave me some structure because I had no structure at all and we didn't have any wisdom in the family. So I tried to do the right thing, and 26 I got married. I married one of his sisters in the mosque, very young.
Vera was 17. Sharif was in the mosque. And Sharif initially wanted to marry my sister older than Vera. I think she was 2 years older. Her name is Doris. And she wouldn't marry him. And so he asked my mom if he could marry Vera. They moved to Lawrenceville. We didn't really see Vera very much. They didn't come around. I knew that they had a child right away, and Salim. And I think like a couple of years later, they had Mikal. And I only really remember seeing Mikal maybe twice.
So I married someone younger. I figured I could maybe control a little better. But you cannot do that. Well, I didn't have it together, so, but we had 2 beautiful sons. I don't regret that.
She said he was a fighter, and she said everyone in the house is afraid of him, even his mom. She went to college. She wanted to be a nurse, and I think she got pregnant again with Mikal, and I think she had to drop out of school. He didn't want her to go to school anyway.
She was much younger, and he had a sort of like a controlling thing on her. She couldn't do this, she couldn't do that. And they moved to those Section 8 apartments down there, and he was doing acts of infidelity, and she was, faithful to him because he had her under control. If she even said anything, he'll play. You know what lamb and duck is, don't you? The person be lambing and the other person be ducking.
She told my sister that he used to beat the kids, not spank, but beat. And yeah, so I don't think she could do anything.
Spending time at our grandparents' house, because my grandfather had passed away. It was fun. It was me, my cousin Nate, his brother Salim, himself. I mean, we were just kids, We played outside a lot, climbed trees, walked and ran through the woods. Things that I would think normal kids in a country town would do.
Well, the first couple of years was all right, but after that, she had a very difficult life, and she was, abusive of a situation. I think she was abused by her grandfather. So she didn't have no feelings or emotions, she was detached from that experience. And I had my issues, I'm sure. So I did everything I could to make her stay. So unfortunately for Mikal, she skipped when he was 5 years old. That's how I could put it back together, he loved his mother. He used to be so happy, and he used to hum all the time. The only child I ever seen, he was so happy, he used to hum. I couldn't get the pieces back together.
Well, she left, and she wasn't allowed to take her children. He told her that if she took the kids, she told him she wanted to leave, but he said he would kill her. She left when he wasn't home, and so Mikal and Salim stayed with the dad, and she moved to Pennsylvania with Doris.
You have two boys who were in a living situation with their mother and father, and that probably wasn't the best relationship. And then the person that was there most of the time, now she's gone and left you behind. That's when I remember a change happening in the energy of my cousins, Salim and Mikal. And my uncle Sharif, all three. It was a lot of now negative energy.
Unfortunately, the marriage didn't last, and Mikal had to suffer, and Salim had to suffer a lot. I did the best I could.
My mother had a house in Broadnax where my baby sister is now. They moved up there.
When she came back to Virginia from Pennsylvania, she wanted to move with me because I believed I lived closer to her job. And I came home one night because I was working like the night shift, and my door was like wide open, and it was like dark. And so I called for her, and she wasn't home. And so, I just thought she had went somewhere. But her car was outside, so I thought it was strange, but, she was an adult.
Mikal, saw some violence and different things. And it hadn't been for I took her up to the farm, and I decided I was going to cut her head off and give it to the imam, because that sounds about right. There's nowhere in this line where you do shit like that. But my ego, I was offended, ego gets involved, and then the sexual jealousy, makes you crazy.
And Salim and Mikal witnessed their father choking and trying to drown their mother in the creek behind the house in Broadnax. And then she ran. And I had a cousin up there, and they got her to Richmond, and that was the end of the marriage. And those two boys witnessed that.
And my cousin hadn't been there. My female cousin hadn't been at the farm where I had her at, you know, she'd be dead in the ground by now. So thank God, God is merciful. I didn't hit her with my fist or no object. Maybe I smacked her around a little bit, you know. But I know I put the Marine Corps on her and she was terrified.
So the next day she came home and she was covered in bruises. I mean, all over. Arms, legs, everything. And I was like, what happened to you? And she was like, Sharif came here. She was trying to see the boys. And she said he came here and like dragged her out the house. She didn't have on, she had on her pajamas and no shoes. And because when she came back, she was still barefoot. And I was like, oh my God. Drove her down to Lawrenceville, took her in the woods and beat her. And I don't know, I think he was mad because she left him. And I asked her to call the police and she didn't want to call the police. And I think just trying to see the kids.
One thing about children that we know is that, you know, when they have those early breaks in family, right? When the mom leaves, when the father leaves, or when anyone who's a part of that immediate family unit falls out of it, that can be a harbinger for some significant difficulties down the road. And I think that was just one piece of what was happening with Mikal. It's almost a double or triple whammy, if you will, because not only do you have the intergenerational trauma, but you also have his own personal traumas. And what I think is unique here is that, so when you have that kind of intergenerational trauma, there can still be hope, there can still be change, right? Because if there's someone who's able to break the cycle, if you have a strong family figure, if the mom is strong, if the dad is strong, if the grandparents, someone in there is particularly strong and supportive, right? We can get kids to turn. However, for Mikal, he didn't have that. He just didn't have that. He came into a situation that was pretty bad. That was pretty bad. And watched his father brutalize his mom over a number of different times. And then she left. And then, as I understood, he was told that his mom didn't want him. It's devastating. That is devastating for a child to hear.
After a few years, I decided to have a better opportunity with my siblings, my sister, my brother. They had a better economic situation, and I thought it'd be better if they took care of them, you know, because I was pretty much fucked up.
So I spent weekends and summers with my dad. My sister is younger than Mikal, Sarah. And her reading level was like far beyond what his reading level was. He couldn't read.
Well, when he went to Miss Harris's class, that was a gift from God, because she had a grouping of children who were they weren't slow learners, but because of emotional difficulties and whatnot. So in her class, he just flourished. So between her class, for being his school environment, Carson was helping him with his homework and whatnot, and my attempts, to nurture, and be the maternal figure, things were going nicely as far as I was concerned. His grades were good, and he was learning.
So Mikal was, with my brother in Baltimore. He was doing all right for a while.
And he didn't seem unhappy. Every once in a while he'd say, "Oh, just shoot me." And to me it meant, I'm miserable. It didn't mean, that I'm miserable and there's nothing I can do about it. But what I knew was that when he was talking to me, he was not with his family. So, that it could have been a number of factors, including the fact that, he was not with his family.
I don't know what happened, but he called the cops on my brother and said he'd been abused. And they took him to somewhere and they shot him up with some drugs and then, I don't know, fucked him all up.
And that seemed to occur in part as a result of him making a suicide gesture and saying that he wanted to commit suicide at 9 years old. When he made that suicidal threat and was hospitalized as a result of that, and I remember the record and the psychiatrist talking about how sad he was, and his diagnosis, which I agreed with from the record, was a major depressive, at least episode. You don't see that many 8 or 9 year olds saying that they want to commit suicide. So that already stands out to me. And again, I've worked with a lot of children who've seen a lot of difficult things, and I could count the number of 8, 9 year olds on one hand who have said that these things are so horrible that they want to hurt themselves. And that's what happened with him.
I think it was maybe 2 years. Carolyn decided that she couldn't take the responsibility for Salim. And so she wanted him to go back to Lawrenceville to his father. And Carson wanted to send him back also, but I didn't. And I said, Mikal, if you want to stay here, I will make sure that you have what you need until you can at least finish high school. You don't have to go back to Lawrenceville. And he said no, he wanted to go back to Lawrenceville. So I didn't try to change his mind about that.
Mikal's 9, and what do 9-year-olds want to do to feel better? They want to go to their family. They want to go to their parents, even if their parents are the ones who are putting them in a situation that's difficult, that's scary, that's painful, that's abusive. He returns home, ultimately returns to that space where he's being abused, and the abuse continues.
In Baltimore, all I had to focus on was schoolwork, so it was a completely different dynamic. If you're trying to survive or whatever, your priorities change. My life would have turned out completely different if I would have stayed in Baltimore, but that is a whole lot of coulda, woulda, shoulda.
So he comes back to Virginia and he's reevaluated. This time it's a psychological evaluation, and the psychological evaluation confirms PTSD, right? And says there's also some depression, and really the depression grows out of the PTSD, which is exactly what should be done. And at that point, that's when the treatment should occur. That is what doesn't happen for him.
I'm a retired teacher, and I came in contact with Mikal when I was teaching special ed, and I had 5th graders. I was given his IEP, which his disability was SED, severely emotionally disturbed. So we had to write another IEP, and his father attended, and the father, he, became irate, and he cursed us all, and he left. I didn't know what was going to be the outcome of Mikal. If his father didn't wise up, it was not going to be positive.
He took him out of school and was homeschooling him at home. And he was substituting for the Brunswick County school system during the time that he was supposed to be teaching his kids. Because I questioned it. That was a question that I had to the superintendent of the school. How can you say this man is homeschooling his kids when y'all have hired him as a substitute teacher?
And it was like isolation as for the boys. Whatever he had against the school system, I didn't know what caused it. By him saying that he could handle it, I didn't think there was going to be success.
Yeah, he wasn't teaching them how to be a Muslim and how to be defiant. He wasn't doing no and then nobody was checking.
Sharif was really not prepared to be a good parent. That's all I can say. He took them in the woods and taught them how to shoot as young boys. And what he was telling them, you know, I have absolutely no idea. But the point is that he was into the guns and that kind of thing.
I can remember driving from South Hill back to Lawrenceville and seeing him walking on the road, you know, and I picked him up and carried him home, Sharif. And he told me about some things that those kids he had them doing, you know, which was against the law, breaking into people's houses, you know. And but I got the impression they didn't have a job. I was wondering how they ate.
Well, I guess I raised them a little rough on the farm, you know. I was always a nice guy. People took advantage of my kindness, and I didn't want my sons to be nicey nice guys. You know. Life is rough. I wasn't taught that. I was just a jock. I wanted my boys, I didn't want nobody fucking with them, so they were pretty rough guys.
I never perceived my childhood as being bad or anything, but I do realize that your father getting you up in the morning to do paramilitary training isn't normal. I do realize that.
And almost immediately, when he becomes involved with the juvenile justice system, the tenor of his reports change, right? And no longer are they focusing in on the trauma, no longer are they focusing in on the depression, they're focusing on behavioral issues. And as a result of that, the tenor of his reports, of his psychological evaluations, the tenor of the treatment with him changes from let's understand, begin to treat this trauma, to let's manage his behavior. And that's really important. So it would be like, if I could use a medical model, a person has cancer, and a lot of times cancer can weaken your immune system or do any number of things. And as a result of that, you get a cold, you get a flu. Right. And if you spend your time treating the flu and not the cancer, right, what's the point? What are you really doing? And that's what was happening with Mikal. No one ever took the time to actually treat the actual issue. They only treated these satellite kinds of symptoms. And the issue continued to grow, continued to metastasize, and until it really became tragic.
I thought it would corrective measures, but when he got out the last time out of juvie, they had pretty much messed him up, you know. And when he came out, I was trying to get some, you know, help. He had come out of juvie previously. It seemed like he was all right, but this last time he came out of juvie, I mean, he was really messed up. So I tried to get some help for him, and they didn't have any help for him, you know. So,
you know, he was just part of the system. They ain't do nothing for him. They ain't give him no training. They ain't give him no skills. Then try to rehabilitate him. You can't rehabilitate if you haven't habilitated, you know what I'm saying? You know, they ain't do nothing for him. It's obvious. If they done anything for him, we'd be here.
what I thought was really fascinating and horrible about the notes that I read was how he was treated while he was detained. There were numerous times where he talked about being suicidal, where he talked about being sad. And because of the way that they were beginning to shape him and shape his records and shape who he was diagnostically, they understood his cries for help, his depression, his sadness as him being manipulative. That does not happen frequently in children. Usually when children say that they're in pain, they are in pain. So when he's at his worst, he's crying out, he's saying, I need help, right? And they're saying, no, you're lying. No, that's not true. And in fact, they're going a step further and placing him into isolation and brutalizing him. And after that happens, year after year after year, anger builds. Anger builds. And that depression hardens. And that trauma hardens. And it turns into anger that becomes really difficult to control. I don't think I've ever seen a child say, I'm suicidal, I want to hurt myself, and he's placed in isolation, I think in one case for 2 weeks. Well, what does that do to a child, right? And I mean, the immediate message is, no one cares about you. You can die in this cell for all that we care. How does that leave a person feeling about themselves? How does it leave a person feeling about the individuals who are doing that to them, right? And when you've had a lifetime of that, right? I think for me, that's the piece that's just unfathomable.
Before he went, I told both the boys I couldn't do no stuff like visiting the prisons, you know. I couldn't do it. I was their mother and the father. I couldn't do that no more. And when we got in trouble, I almost had a stroke. I was in the mosque and the imam and a couple of friends were looking after me and I almost had a stroke. And it was just, I was so ignorant about these things. He told me he could get out and I was going to try to get him to Philadelphia, you know, but the rules of the probation, he couldn't leave the state. So he was there with my son and my brother and my grandmother, so I thought he would, you know, hoping it would be all right, you know, because they said I was a bad influence. So I had a little money to send him, and he was doing okay. The next thing I know, he had killed these people. But as a parent, you're going to feel guilty anyway, but I just couldn't function. I feel guilty.
I mean, one thing I did learn, nearly every situation is salvageable just about, so. Well, I think I fucked my life up more and more and more and more and more, not believing that the situation is salvageable. Because I know I got out of Walton's Ridge thinking my life was over any goddamn way with a felony conviction.
Part of being a child who's been traumatized or a child who's been abused is that they tend to believe that it's all somehow their fault, right? When their parents beat them, I should have been a better child. But that's a sign of trauma. As he grows older and, you know, just talks about thinking that he could have done things so much differently. And in part, again, there were some things he could have done differently. But I'm not aware of anyone who can be brutalized in the ways that he was. And not have really severe problems later on in life.
They had tremendous potential. He was intelligent and he was athletic. He could have, you know, if he had the proper upbringing, probably he could have probably participated in sports at the high school level, something to occupy, and probably would have done well in school. But he didn't have the opportunity, never presented itself. He's the product of what he was exposed to and what he was limited to. That's as simple as that.
I don't know what to say to Mikal. It's been some time. It's been some time. I don't have no excuse. I don't know what to say. I just feel like I'm guilt-ridden. I felt like I failed him. I know I failed him. I failed myself. I don't make no excuses.
There's so many things that happened to him. But you have to imagine, just with his resilience, with how smart he is, how engaged he is, if those things didn't happen, who would he be now? He just did not have a shot. And I guess that's the hopeful piece of it, because maybe there's still some opportunity to give him something like a shot that he never has, and he deserves a shot. Everyone deserves a shot.